The neighborhood had always been a mosaic of eclectic porches, each one a distinct narrative, a glimpse into the lives of those who called this cul-de-sac their home. Mine was no different. A modest affair with a swing my grandfather built, creaking slightly in sync with the gentle breezes that carried whispers of rustling leaves. It was a place for morning coffees and evening reflections, a threshold between the world inside and the one beyond. Enter Karen. A self-appointed custodian of conformity, she was the type who saw a world better ordered under her meticulous scrutiny. Her first edict came wrapped in flowery language, disguising its severity beneath a veil of concern. She wanted to standardize the neighborhood. No more mismatched railings or vibrant front doors that clashed with her monochrome vision. No more porches. It was a peculiar vendetta. But Karen had a knack for the peculiar, believing it to be her duty to cleanse the world of what she deemed unsightly. Her initial forays were subtle. Notes slipped under doors, reminders about property values and the importance of uniformity. She cloaked her words in a veneer of neighborly care, but the sharp edges were clear to those who read between the lines. I watched from my porch, my sanctuary, as her crusade gathered momentum. Gardens were trimmed to neat rectangles, colorful pots banished to backyards. Some neighbors folded easily, eager to avoid confrontation, or perhaps indifferent to the charm their porches added to the street. But I was a different story. My porch was a testament to years of lived experiences, each piece of furniture a memory, each plant a testament to resilience. To banish my porch would be to erase part of my life. I wasn't ready to let that happen. I couldn't let that happen. In the quiet hours of the night, as crickets sang their symphony, I pondered my course. Confrontation was never my style. A gentler rebellion, perhaps. An invitation to embrace the diversity that made our street vibrant, rather than succumb to Karen's monochrome fantasy. And so, I decided, the next HOA meeting, an arena of passive-aggressive politicking, would be held on the very porch Karen wished to eliminate. It was a statement wrapped in hospitality, an olive branch with a spine of steel. The day of the meeting dawned crisp and bright, sunlight streaming through the canopy of trees that shaded the street. I set out chairs, brewed a pot of coffee, and laid out snacks. Simple gestures of welcome, yet imbued with purpose. Neighbors arrived, hesitant at first, then curious as they settled into the seats arranged across my porch. Conversations sparked, the air alive with the hum of shared stories. Karen arrived last, her expression a blend of disbelief and indignation, unable to mask the affront she felt at this breach of her mandate. The irony was not lost on the group. Here we were, gathered on the very emblem of what Karen sought to erase, yet it was this space that fostered the community she claimed to protect, a silent testament to resilience, to the beauty of what cannot be tamed. As the meeting unfolded, I remained a quiet observer, allowing the moments to unfurl with the grace of a seasoned storyteller. Karen's voice, usually so commanding, faltered as she faced the living embodiment of her opposition. The porch stood defiantly, and with it, so did we. Karen's fury was a storm gathering on the horizon, and I could feel the electricity in the air, a static charge that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Her gaze lingered on my front porch, a wooden sanctuary that now seemed a battleground in her crusade against anything that defied her vision of sterile perfection. The meeting incident had clearly been an affront, and she was not one to forgive easily, or at all. In the days that followed, Karen wielded the HOA rulebook like a scythe. I awoke one morning to find a bright yellow citation taped to my mailbox, as conspicuous as a canary in a coal mine. Unauthorized porch ornamentation, it read, the accusation screaming in bold letters. Apparently the potted ferns flanking my doorway were now a crime against the neighborhood's aesthetic. The absurdity was almost comical. Her campaign didn't stop there. Rumors, like autumn leaves, began to drift through the neighborhood, rustling softly at first, but soon swirling in a blustery dance of gossip. I heard snippets of conversation at the local coffee shop, whispers of how my garden gnomes were deemed distasteful by some unnamed authority. their whimsical grins now symbols of rebellion. Karen's influence was insidious, permeating every crevice of community life. The HOA bulletin board, usually a drab mosaic of lost pet notices and handyman services, suddenly featured a new set of guidelines. Uniformity and harmony, the poster declared, its bullet points outlining the eradication of individuality. I recognized Karen's handiwork in the neatly typed instructions, each one a veiled threat wrapped in the guise of propriety. I could sense the neighborhood's eyes on me, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Would I comply or dig in my heels? Each step I took along the sidewalk felt measured, each nod from a neighbor weighted with unasked questions. But my porch, my small patch of defiance, remained a bastion of stubborn normalcy amid the growing madness. As Karen's rules proliferated like weeds, I noted the irony. In her quest for control, she had unwittingly sown the seeds of discord. The neighbors were beginning to murmur, a collective unease bubbling beneath the surface. I could see it in their sidelong glances, the way their conversations shifted like shadows when she approached. One evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long shadows across the porch, I found another citation. Noise violation, it accused, referencing the laughter and conversation that had spilled warmly from my porch during the meeting. I could almost hear her voice in the clipped language, the words sharp as thorns. Her escalation was a symphony of the absurd, a crescendo that threatened to drown out the quiet dignity of our community. Yet, in her zeal, she had overlooked a crucial fact. People, like gardens, thrive on diversity. Our different voices, our various porches, were what made this neighborhood a home. As I sat on my porch that evening, the warmth of the setting sun brushing against my skin, I pondered my next move. Karen had cast her die, but this was a game of patience, and I was not one to fold under pressure. The porch creaked softly beneath me, a gentle reminder of its presence, its quiet strength. Just like me, it had stood here long before Karen's reign of rigidity, and it would endure long after. The morning of the Homeowners Association meeting dawned with a soft, golden light filtering through the gauzy curtains of my living room. It was the kind of light that whispered promises of clarity and resolution, the kind that seemed almost too pure for the chaos that had been swirling in our little suburban enclave. My porch, the very patch of rebellion that had birthed this showdown with Karen, stood resolute, adorned with the season's blooms and an antique rocking chair that creaked with stories untold. I replayed the events of the past weeks in my mind, each moment a brushstroke on the canvas of this surreal battle. Karen, with her clipped tones and rigid posture, had been relentless. Her crusade against front porches was as intense as it was perplexing. She saw them as eyesores, distractions in her vision of a cookie-cutter paradise. I saw them as extensions of our lives, thresholds where the private met the public, where neighbors became friends over morning coffee and children exchanged dreams as they waved to the ice cream truck. I had documented everything, not out of malice, but out of necessity. The letters slipped under doors at twilight, the furtive phone calls from other homeowners, the quiet murmurs of dissent, a tapestry of resistance, woven through whispers and determined nods. It was ironic that the very thing she despised was to be the stage for her undoing. The guests arrived in trickles at first, hesitant and curious. My porch, bedecked in its informal finery, became a hub of hushed anticipation. Plump cushions and the scent of freshly baked cookies, an offering of hospitality, masked the underlying tension. Neighbors who had once exchanged little more than polite nods now shared complicit smiles, their eyes alight with the thrill of quiet rebellion. As the meeting commenced, the air seemed to hum with a blend of uneasiness and excitement. I stood at the edge, an observer in this theater of suburban politics, feeling like a stagehand who had unwittingly become the protagonist. Karen's arrival was a spectacle in itself, her brisk footsteps echoing an unspoken symphony of control. Her eyes flitted across the assembled group, a fleeting shadow of uncertainty crossing her features as she took in my porch, the battleground she never anticipated. I unveiled my preparations with a subtlety honed by weeks of planning. A presentation, projected on a screen that stood near the porch's edge, highlighted the importance of community spaces. Images of front porches swathed in the warm glow of sunset, children playing tag on manicured lawns, old friends huddled in laughter. A narrative of connection and tradition, more powerful than any heated argument. Karen's expression shifted, a crack in her steely facade. The neighbors, emboldened by the shared experience, began to nod in agreement. The atmosphere transformed, the tide turning with the inevitability of a rising sun. In that charged silence, my porch ceased to be just a structure. It became a symbol of resilience, of community, of the quiet power of unity. And there it was, the moment that seemed to suspend itself in time, the irony palpable. Karen, once the orchestrator of discord, found herself enveloped in the very harmony she had sought to dismantle. A single statement hung in the air, a whispered truth. Sometimes, the spaces we share build bridges we never knew we needed. The meeting concluded not with the expected rancor, but with a sense of restored balance. Neighbors lingered, chatting amiably, the tension dissipating like morning mist under the sun's warm gaze. As the last of the guests departed, leaving behind a trail of laughter and camaraderie, I stood on my porch, the silent sentinel of this small but significant victory. The porch, much like life, had proven its worth beyond the mere act of existing. It had, in its steadfast simplicity, transformed a community and rewritten a story that was meant to be forgotten. A ripple of whispers floated on the breeze as neighbors filed into my front yard, a gallery of puzzled faces against the backdrop of well-manicured lawns and pastel-painted houses. The word had spread. The HOA meeting was to take place on my front porch, the very stage of Karen's latest crusade against the neighborhood. Her campaign had been relentless, an iron-fisted grip attempting to squeeze out every last drop of individuality from our community. But now, the spotlight was on her, and I could almost feel the neighborhood holding its collective breath. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the yard, drawing the line between the cool of the porch and the warmth of the grass. It was a setting fit for confrontation, where the tangible and the intangible met in silent conflict. I stood there, a quiet observer in my own story, watching as the neighbors settled onto mismatched chairs and borrowed cushions. This was my stage now, a defiant testament to personal sanctuary against the encroaching tide of conformity. I scanned the crowd. Curiosity painted their features, skepticism lingering at the edges. Their eyes flickered between the porch and the street, where Karen would undoubtedly make her grand entrance. Her appearance was inevitable, a force of nature that couldn't resist the gravitational pull of an audience. They all knew why they were here. Not for the usual droning discussions of fence heights and acceptable hues of beige, but for the unspoken challenge that hung heavily in the air. The whispers grew louder, a mounting symphony of speculation and anticipation. Tension coiled like a spring, ready to explode with the arrival of its catalyst. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a knot of adrenaline and determination. Karen was formidable, yes, but she was also predictable. Her strategies were woven from the same fabric of control, a tapestry of rules that strangled more than they supported. She underestimated the quiet power of unity, of a neighborhood tired of being dictated to. The creak of the gate heralded her arrival, a discordant note in the murmur of the gathering. Karen strode forward, her presence commanding and sharp, like a cold wind cutting through the warmth of a summer evening. The crowd shifted subtly, a ripple of unease at her approach. Her eyes were hard, calculating as she surveyed the scene before her. It was her moment, but it had come unexpectedly, on terms she hadn't set. I met her gaze, a silent acknowledgement of the roles we played. She was the orchestrator of dissent, but I was the unexpected conductor of this unfolding symphony. The air was thick with unspoken words, each breath a testament to the silent resistance that had been quietly building. Karen's mouth opened, a single line slipping from her lips, a shard of ice meant to fracture the resolve of those gathered. But the words fell flat, absorbed by the warmth of the porch, the heartbeat of the neighborhood surrounding us. In that moment, the porch became more than just a battleground. It transformed into a symbol of defiance, of the collective heartbeat of a community standing its ground. The tide had turned, and though the battle was not yet won, the seeds of change were sown. Here, on this small patch of wood and nails, we had found our voice. Silence settled over us deeper than before, a heavy, expectant lull. The porch stood firm beneath my feet, and I knew, we all knew, that this was just the beginning. The sun hung low as I sat on my porch, the wooden boards groaning softly beneath my weight. Shadows stretched long and thin across the manicured lawns that spread out like a patchwork quilt in our suburban enclave. It was an evening like any other, the air perfumed with the light scent of gardenias and the distant hum of lawnmowers. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a simmering tension, like a kettle just about to whistle. Karen had overplayed her hand when she tried to ban front porches, the very heart of our community's charm. Her crusade was the latest in a long line of absurdities, a catalog of petty tyrannies that had slowly frayed the neighborhood's patience. Her rule was one of nitpick and nuisance, enforced with the zeal of a despot and the pettiness of a child denied candy. But I had been patient. I watched and waited, a chess player biding time, knowing the right moment would come, and come it did with the regularity of tomorrow's sunrise. The HOA meeting would be held on my porch, a bold statement perhaps, but a necessary one. Karen had driven us to this, her demands becoming the fuel for our collective resolve. The irony was sharp and delicious, a taste that lingered like fine wine. I had taken quiet but effective steps in the weeks leading up to this evening. The bylaws, dusty and neglected, had been my constant companion. Pages flipped and fingers traced lines until the words themselves became an intimate whisper, a secret just waiting to be spoken aloud. The legal path was intricate, but not impassable. It required patience, precision, the quiet strength of water wearing down stone. I found allies in unlikely places, neighbors who had tired of Karen's reign, their allegiance sealed with a nod and a shared smile over fence posts. Together, we crafted a plan as seamless as a spider's web. The evening gathered its cloak of dusk, painting the sky with strokes of purple and gold. Neighbors arrived one by one, settling onto the porch with a nod or a murmured greeting. The air was thick with anticipation, a palpable promise of change. Finally, Karen arrived, her expression tight as a stretched canvas. She eyed the gathering with suspicion, a general surveying the field. Yet beneath her veneer of control, a flicker of doubt. She sensed something was different, that the tide was turning. I stood, the bylaw book in hand, its spine cracked from use and pages marked with notes of consequence. The neighbors watched, their eyes gleaming with the kind of hope that only comes from shared resolve. It was time. As I began to speak, the porch seemed to take a breath, the world narrowing to this small stage. My voice carried on the evening breeze, a ripple through the gathered crowd. I laid out the bylaws, each word a stone in the foundation we were building, until the picture became clear. Karen's face was a canvas of emotions, disbelief, anger, a dawning realization that the play was almost over. Her empire, built on rules and regulations, was crumbling like a sandcastle before the tide. And then, a voice from the crowd, clear and strong. "Isn't it time we moved on?" The question hung in the air, a turning point, a release. In that moment, I saw Karen's resolve falter, a queen about to be checkmated. The porch had become our battleground, our sanctuary, our stage. And as the evening deepened into night, the neighborhood, one by one, reclaimed its voice. In silence, in unity, in the quiet power of change. The morning sun cast a warm, golden hue over the neighborhood, wrapping it in a reassuring embrace as if signaling that the storm had passed. I stood on my front porch, the wood creaking softly beneath my feet, a symphony I had come to cherish. My porch was my sanctuary, a testament to simple pleasures in a world often consumed by chaos. Today, it was more than just a place. It was a symbol of resistance, of community, and of quiet triumph. The HOA meeting was set to commence in a few hours, and though the air was thick with anticipation, there was a peculiar calm about it all. One by one, my neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by curiosity, or perhaps a sense of solidarity. I had transformed my porch into a makeshift meeting hall, adorned with folding chairs and a table draped in the community's unspoken resilience. Karen was a formidable force, no doubt. Her attempts to strip the neighborhood of its character had been relentless. Yet, as I watched the steady stream of neighbors approach, I sensed the tide had turned. The community had found its voice, and it was rising above the din of Karen's suffocating demands. I stood quietly, smiling at the familiar faces, each marked by the struggles and victories that had shaped them. We exchanged nods and small gestures of camaraderie. No words were needed. The shared understanding was palpable. The meeting began without fanfare. As the mundane agenda unfolded, my mind wandered to the irony of it all. Karen's campaign against front porches had inadvertently brought us together, creating a space where we could express what we truly valued. Her absence was conspicuous. An empty chair at the table she once ruled with an iron fist. It was an unspoken victory, a testament to the power of collective resolve. Minutes passed, marked by the rustling of paper and the gentle murmur of discussion. The neighborhood was speaking, not with the loud, demanding voice Karen had wielded, but with a gentle conviction that resonated deeply. We were reclaiming our space, one porch at a time. In a moment of unexpected clarity, as if fate were not devoid of a sense of irony, Karen appeared at the edge of the gathering. She lingered at the periphery, eyes scanning the gathering she once commanded with ferocity. The community's resolve had forced her into an unfamiliar role, a spectator of her own demise. A single line broke the silence, a voice from somewhere in the crowd. It was both a question and a statement, echoing the sentiment of many. What makes a house a home? It hung in the air, a challenge and a truth. Karen flinched, the words striking her fortress of self-assuredness. Her eyes met mine briefly, a flicker of understanding passing between us. Perhaps it was then she realized the futility of her war against the porches, against the homes, against the souls she had tried to bend to her will. And, as the meeting concluded, with decisions made and unity restored, I watched Karen retreat, her silhouette dissolving into the shadows of a neighborhood that had chosen its path. There was no gloating, no triumphant cry, just the quiet satisfaction of a battle won not through confrontation, but through community and conviction. I lingered on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. It was a new dawn, a new beginning, a neighborhood restored to its rightful harmony. And as I took a final sip of my coffee, the warmth spread through me, much like the hope that now bound us all together.